Hello! In this video I'll show you some of the features of the HPC1200CMB and a few tips. This machine has become an industry standard. The vast majority of locksmith shops have one of these, usually several. If you're going to work as a locksmith, you should know how to operate the HPC1200CMB. HPC is the name of the company that builds the machine. 1200 is the model number. It's a key machine, but more specifically it's a code machine. That's what the CM stands for. Every key has a combination. Here is a Schlage 5-cut key whose bidding is 53375. It's stamped right here on the bow of the key. That's common for factory cut Schlage 5-cut keys. A few other residential locks stamp their biddings on the keys too, most don't. If I put this 53375 key into the duplicator with the correct key blank, I should get another 53375 key. A code machine works differently. You create a key with whatever bidding you need. Here's the bidding list from a master key system. You can see that the top master key is 34512. There are two change keys in use, 34714 and 34114. 34914 was skipped because it's a max violation. If we need another key, the next available bidding is 34314. Here's how we make that key using the HPC 1200. This machine is already set up for cutting Schlage keys. We're going to make 5 cuts onto this key blank. The depth of each cut is determined by that number in the bidding. We control the depth using the depth wheel and watching the depth needle. The position of the cut is controlled by the space wheel, watching the space needle. We locate the first cut with number 1, the second cut, number 2, etc. You clamp the blank into the vise just like any ordinary key machine. This key blank has upper and lower shoulders, so you can use either one. If you use the upper shoulder, be sure to swing the shoulder stop arm down out of the way before you turn on the machine. If you forget, a safety switch prevents the motor from turning, so the cutting wheel won't damage the arm. If you turn it on and nothing happens, check to make sure that the shoulder stop is all the way down, and then try it again. Here's the bidding of the key we need. 34314. Clamp the key blank into the jaw. Protect your eyes and ears. Switch on the machine. Set the space needle for 1. For the first cut. Turn the depth wheel until the depth needle reaches 3. Now back it off, and we're ready to move to the next cut. Did you notice that the cutting wheel started making noise before the needle reached 0? That's a good sign that the blank is properly clamped in the vise. An uncut Schlage key blank is just a little bit shallower than a 0 cut. The cutting wheel contacted the blank when the needle, if the cutting wheel contacts the blank when the needle is a long way from 0, that can indicate that the machine is miscalibrated. That could indicate a problem. Okay, let's make the second cut. Set the space needle on 2. Move the depth needle to 4. and back it off. Our third cut is a 3. Set the space needle on 3 and use the depth wheel to set the depth needle on 3. And back it off. The fourth cut is a 1. Set the space needle on 4. Move the depth needle to 1 using the depth wheel. And then back it off. The fifth cut is a 4. Set the space needle on 5 and move the depth needle to 4. Back it off, unclamp the key, brush the burrs off the key, and switch off the machine. Now let me show you how fast this thing goes after you've had some practice. I'll make another copy exactly the same, 34314. Done. One reason this machine is so fast is that you don't have to turn the wheels very far. The old version of the machine was the 1200CM. You had to crank the wheel several turns to get to where you needed to be. The newer version is the 1200CMB. The B stands for Blitz. It's twice as fast as the old 1200CM. I said before that this machine was currently set up for Schlage keys. It can cut a huge variety of different keys just by changing the code card and selecting the appropriate cutting wheel. Each code card will tell you which cutting wheel to use. This machine comes standard with a large deck of cards and 2 cutting wheels, the 1011 and the 14MC. The 1011 works well for most automotive keys. The 14MC is for house keys. The difference is the width of the cut and the angle. There are other cutting wheels too, which you buy separately. I recommend the 47MC and the 90MC. The 47MC is used for some foreign cars. The 90MC is great for Best, Corbin Russwin, and Schlage. But wait! The code card for Schlage says to use the 14MC cutting wheel. Why? Because the code machine comes standard with a 14MC cutting wheel. The 90MC is sold separately. They want you to be able to cut Schlage keys right out of the box. But honestly, the 14MC cutting wheel isn't quite right for Schlage. The max for Schlage is 7. That means you can put a 1 next to an 8, but you can't put a 1 next to a 9. This assumes that you're using a cutting wheel similar to the 90MC. If you switch to the 14MC, you'll have problems putting a 1 next to an 8. That's why the code card says safety factor 6. The max is actually 7. But when you use the 14MC cutting wheel, you need to pretend that it's 6. That's going to be a problem for us because some of the biddings on this page have a 1 next to an 8. Here's one. 34718. If we try to cut that with the 14MC cutting wheel, the root of the number 1 cut will almost disappear. That's a problem. Bottom line, get yourself a 90MC cutting wheel and use it for Schlage keys. Let's talk about some things that can go wrong. If you have the wrong code card in the machine, or if you're using the wrong cutting wheel, you won't get good results. Double check the code card and the wheel before you start. Changing the cutting wheel requires 2 wrenches that come with the machine. You put this wrench here, and you put this wrench over here, and you push forward. When you unscrew this nut, it's backwards thread, so you unscrew it clockwise, and the cutting wheel comes right off. To put the new cutting wheel on, put the cutting wheel over the spindle, thread the nut back on, again, backwards thread. Then you take this wrench, put it on the nut, take this wrench and put it on the other end of the spindle, and this time, instead of pushing forward, you're going to pull back just a little bit to snug it down. That's it. Another thing that can go wrong is your machine may be miscalibrated. Periodically, you should measure one of your keys to make sure that the machine is cutting them correctly. For example, on this key, the third cut is a 3. Now, according to the Schlage card, a number 3 cut should have a root depth of 290. So I will check that with my dial calipers, and I get 290. Now that's with the factory cut key. Now let me try a 3 cut on the key that we made using the HPC and see if we get the same number. You need to check that periodically. If your machine is cutting too deep or too shallow, you should recalibrate the machine, but let's talk about what you can do to compensate. If your machine's cutting too deep, you can compensate by moving the space needle a little bit to the left of the mark. That makes the cut shallower. If the cuts are too shallow, move the needle just a little bit to the right. That makes the cuts deeper. If the machine is cutting too close to the bow, move the space needle to the right. If it's cutting too close to the tip, move the space needle a little bit to the left. It should, ideally, if you calibrate the machine for one code card and cutting wheel, it should be calibrated for all the code cards and all the cutting wheels. In practice, I find that this isn't quite true. When I calibrate the machine properly for Schlage, I find that it cuts just a little too close to the bow for quickset. That's the situation where you'd want to compensate rather than recalibrate. Take a look at this key. It's supposed to be 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. But it looks more like 3, 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5. It starts off just fine, but as you get closer to the tip, the cuts get progressively deeper. This means that you clamped the blank crooked in the jaw. Or it could mean you didn't securely clamp the blank and the vibration of the machine caused it to move while you were cutting it. If you have a recurring problem with keys vibrating out of the jaw, that could indicate that your jaw is worn and needs to be replaced. Finally, the jaw has an A side and a B side. The code card will tell you whether you should be using A or B. If you find that your machine is cutting too deep, that could mean that you flipped the jaw over from the A side to the B side, and then you forgot to flip it back to A again. A machine like this costs about $2,000 new. You can buy a used one for maybe $1,200. And don't forget to buy yourself a 90MC cutting wheel.